I'm Stephen Stone from the Absolute Sound and Enjoy the Music. And this seminar is going to be one that you're probably going to take away different sort of information than a lot of the seminars, which are sort of hands-on or telling you how to tweak your system. Actually, if you're interested in tweaking your system, if you go on to the Rocky Mountain Audio Fest's website, in 2009 we did a seminar about system tweaks that you can still access up there. And since you can, I didn't feel the need to, I kind of wanted to go with a seminar that's maybe a little different than what you're used to. And the basic subject was the past, present, and future of audio. First, let me introduce my panel members. We have Richard Schram from Parasound, and we have Phil Murray from Listen Up, and hopefully we'll have John Schaffer from Wadia.
Phantom Center channel.
Yeah, he Phantom Center, exactly. So, and we're going to kind of, first I'm going to give you about 7 minutes. Actually, you have a watch, Richard?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if I'm still talking at 7 minutes, like, cut me off.
It'll be a miracle if you're done talking in 7 minutes.
Oh, well, he knows me too well. So, basically, first couple of minutes, I'm going to talk about kind of the audio's past and kind of set a benchmark for the present and the future, hopefully. We're kind of, I'm doing, this is the first time I've done a PowerPoint, so if it sucks, I've always hated PowerPoints, but it just is a nice way to kind of organize your thoughts. And we're going to start off with the history of audio, the entire history of audio in 5 minutes. It's just sort of a whirlwind tour. Subtitle, I don't know if you can see in the bottom there, is Vets Gone Wild. Oh, and it moved into the past. Excellent. So audio, our hobby has never existed in a vacuum. It's always been mainly affected by things outside the industry and what we call macro events. And they've influenced our growth far more than anything we've done. Despite some of the wonderful designs and technology in high-end audio, no one design has ever caused a revolution in the industry. Revolutions in the industry have primarily come from outside the industry and had an effect on us. An example of the first big macro event that created the audio industry was basically World War II and Korea. You had something called the GI Bill. Maybe somebody in the audience who's took advantage of the GI Bill. A lot of vets came out and decided to go into electronic engineering. And all these EEs got an education either in the service or when they came out of the service. And they were all music lovers, and they looked around at what they had as options to play music on, and they had these big wooden boxes, these big consoles. And they had the knowledge and to build their own. And so that's where they started, because they realized they didn't need a big box. They could put the electronics in a small box. And that's when the idea of component audio started. There used to be a place in New York City, kind of near Ground Zero, called Canal Street, that had a series of stores that sold nothing but electronic parts, radio parts. And you had guys who went there and started building their own components. There were magazines dedicated to nothing more than schematics and kits and ways to build, and that was a good part of the audio industry in the 40s and 50s. It was primarily a DIY industry. You couldn't go in and just buy components. You basically had to know someone who was building them or learn how to build them yourself. So hobbyists created component audio. And that went on, and that was primarily audiophiles in those days, were guys who built their own stuff and, you know, were engineers and that sort of thing. And then came the Beatles. The Beatles was the first killer app, the first piece of software that really drove hardware. You know, if you were my age and you basically owned all the Beatles albums, probably multiple copies, and you needed a way to play them. KLH came out with the Model 11 Portable. That was a revolutionary product. I see somebody nodding their head. It was the first iPod. It was the first portable music system that a consumer could buy that didn't sound like crap and had a universal appeal. On any given weekend in Harvard Square, there was a little shop called, I think it was the Audio, it wasn't Audio Exchange, but basically it was down in a basement. You walk downstairs to get to it. There used to be lines to buy KLH 11s. It was basically when they got a shipment in, they would sell out literally in half a day. So That basically started the whole mass mid-fi market. That product made people prior to that, manufacturers who'd been making products for a completely different market, realized that there were all these teenagers and they wanted to play music, or all these college students who wanted to play music, and that was the piece that sold. So that went along for a while, and you had magazines coming up to review all this stuff, and the magazines generally said everything, looked at specs, and didn't really listen or talk about sound. The first guy to talk about sound, at least in America, was J. Gordon Holt. It got him fired, to the point he started his own magazine. Stereophile begot the Absolute Sound, because Gordon was very good at a lot of things. Publishing on time was not one of them. And so you have the Absolute Sound. And Absolute Sound developed a concept of the reference system, a set of components in a room you knew, and that you would put another component in, and therefore if you knew how all the components in your system sounded when you added or substituted a component, in theory, whatever differences you heard you could attribute to the new component that you added to your system. And that worked very well for a while, except it developed into what I call the best toys syndrome. Whoever had the most expensive, most esoteric gear could talk about it, but no one else could talk about that gear because they didn't have it. Unobtainium theory, which started a kind of a precedent that has come down to today when you see people do reviews and somebody talks about something and you see on the web somebody goes, "This is fabulous," and everybody jumps on and goes, "Well, what gear were you using with it? How can you say it's fabulous? What was your reference?" Because it ends up being this kind of one-upsmanship. But the problem with one-upsmanship is you get to a certain point and you've bought your dream speakers. What do you buy next? You're going to buy another set of dream speakers? Generally, that's not the case. Somebody buys something in a high price point that is their ideal, especially speakers, and they keep them for a long time. So the industry can't expect someone to replace their speakers every 2 years, which means the market for high-end components is continually shrinking because we're not bringing in new people who are going to buy their dream speakers, and that's one of the major issues we have here. The current demographics that we have in the high-end represents negative growth because our consumers, our customers, our baby boomers, they're either worst-case scenario dying, better-case scenario, they have other things to spend money on like college educations and retirement funds and things that limit their growth. I love Michael Fremer. He's an old friend. We go back 30 years. But I'm sorry, analog is not going to save high-end audio. Despite the fact we all love analog, that's not a growth industry either. Home theater was the kind of great white hope for high-end audio in the 90s. That was what's going to drive it. That was what was going to give us growth. It ain't working no more. People can't roll in the cost of their new home theaters into their home mortgage because they can't get a home mortgage. So that sort of eliminates that problem. And they can't afford a home theater anymore. Again, it's being repossessed. But two areas that I think do show signs of growth, and we'll hopefully talk about them more, is computer-based audio and whole-house wireless audio, which in the old days meant all sorts of terrible little 8-inch speakers buried in the wall and funky little controllers, but that's all changed. Obviously, technology in the course of high-end audio has changed drastically. We started off with records and cassette tapes and reel-to-reel tapes. I mean, in the early days of Stereophile, I don't know if any of you have read the early Stereophiles, Gordon didn't even use phono as a reference source because phono and LPs were not consistent enough, not good enough. If you read the early issues of the Absolute Sound, you'll find arguments that go on for pages about a particular cartridge. Two different reviewers would have a different opinion of the same cartridge, and then they would get all the cartridges together and look at them and find out they had radically different specs. So they sounded different. So the consistency of LPs and phono stages in the early days was very bad, to the point that reel-to-reel tapes was a much better choice. But as we progressed, we had Dolby, we had A, B, C, and just before Dolby, before cassettes went out, we had Dolby S, which was actually kind of brings up the idea that just before technology becomes obsolete, it's finally perfected. That's just the way it works. And in some ways, what you want to do is buy the last generation of whatever technology you think is about to go away, because you're probably not going to get a chance to buy it again. So as digital has come along, and we've gone from 44 to 48 to 88 to 96 to 172 to all the way up, all the way up. And it's gotten better and better to the point that we basically are listening to master tapes. What we can get at home is equal to what a mastering engineer is listening to in his mastering desk. So that separation between the remaster tapes and, say, the LP, which has a whole bunch of steps and stampers and blah, 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 and back and forth, and negative, positive, eliminate that. You're basically listening to the exact same file that the mastering engineer can listen to. And that's an amazing capability that you would think would drive the industry to new heights, and hopefully it will, but it hasn't yet. So on the other extreme, we have MP3s. Not so good sounding. Even at 320, they're acceptable and listenable, but there's no way they have the inner detail of a non-lossy digital file. So on one end, we've gotten to the point that we're almost listening to what the master tapes are like, but the mass group of iPod users and younger people are generally listening to downloads, which are MP3s, and their MP3s, if they're lucky, they're about 1/3 the quality of that they could be if they were top quality MP3s. In other words, they're 128 instead of 320, which is the top for MP3s. So the problem is, if MP3s become the predominant source, is there any reason to own super revealing electronics if all you're passing is MP3 information? The inference is no. The future of distribution of music is going to be kind of not in the hands of high-end audio. It is in the hands of computer makers. It's in the hands of software makers. It's in the hands of Apple and Sony. They're going to decide how you're going to get your music in the near future. How many of you have not heard the term cloud computing? Yeah, it's pretty prevalent. And the concept behind cloud computing and the concept of the future as envisioned by majors is to have everything in a huge server farm, and when you want music, you get it streamed to your computer. You never have a copy of the digital file. It's a pay-per-use system. It eliminates issues of of music files being moved around and owned by consumers. They don't want you to own consumer music files. Ideally, it would be streamed. You would be renting your music. Now, the collectors in the audience might find that very abhorrent because suddenly we don't have the thing. We just have the experience of music, but we don't own it anymore. My concern with that is, what is the resolution of this new streaming system? We don't know. It could be high resolution, it could be full lossless files, or it could be 64 kilobytes per second. It could be basically Dixie cup and a string quality. We just don't know. So that's going to have a big influence on the audio industry, and it's something that's very much up in the air. Obviously, the second model for digital is downloading digital files. Ideal is, again, they're the same file that the mastering engineer had, and you've suddenly got them on your desk and can play them back and have all the fidelity of the original. So those are two major directions. Other macro trends that are important are, I'm looking at the demographics of my audience here, and basically this is a mimic of our current demographics for the high end. And I like all you people, and you're all wonderful, but you're all way too old. You just are. If the industry is going to survive, we have to have a way of bringing in the X and Y generation marketplace. And unfortunately, the X and Y generation marketplace, consumers, they listen in a different way than we do. Their ears still work, but how many people know anyone under the age of 20 who does only one thing at a time? They multitask. Multitasking and the way we're used to listening to two-channel audio are diametrically opposed. Two-channel listening is almost like meditation. You're eliminating external sources. You're focusing on the music. It's the only thing, and it gets your full attention. Multitasking and the way younger people tend to absorb media is multiple media at one time. My niece can do her homework, play Halo, watch TV, and download something from YouTube all at once. And she's getting solid Bs, so I guess her brain is still working. So that's kind of a major influence on equipment manufacturers and how things are used and sold. Lifestyle is really becoming king. People want to bring their music with them everywhere. They want full portability. They want to be able to not have to go into another environment. They want to basically bring the environment with them, which points toward portability as being a primary function of newer components. Obviously, people's patience level for dicking around with stuff is much more limited than the audiophile of today, let alone the hobbyist of 30 years ago, who basically built everything from the ground up and did it because they enjoyed screwing around with stuff. That was part of the hobby. People now, when we listen to music, want to listen to music primarily. They don't want to have to go around the back of their component and mess with this and adjust that. They want to push a button and have it happen. And that's something high-end manufacturers have to be prepared for, and that's something that high-end consumers are more and more of the products are going to be in that direction, which I think is a good thing. Lastly, one of the major trends I want to talk about is there are two aspects to audio as we currently know them. There's the thing, the object, the beautifully finished half-inch milled front panel of anodized gold with the wooden knobs that are perfectly finished, and the speakers that if you look at the burl on the side have the face of a person screaming. That's important stuff. I mean, that's good stuff. I mean, that's one of the things that adds value to components is the quality of the parts. But the quality of the parts have absolutely nothing to do with the listening experience. The listening experience is completely different than the object that makes that experience possible. And as we go on, the experience is becoming more important and the object is becoming less important. And that's a strong macro trend that we have to deal with. Yeah, this basically covers the stuff that I just talked about. Two diametrically opposed influences that are going to be very important to high-end audio is connectivity, the ability of everything to work with everything else seamlessly, versus optimum sonics. A lot of times when you go online, an excellent source if you're into computer audio is something like the Well-Tempered Computer. One of the first things you'll see is that you should not be running other apps at the same time, that you should basically strip out your computer of everything that's not sonically related for maximum performance. And that'll give you maximum performance, but minimum connectivity. So you see where I'm going with these. These are two trends that are basically veering in opposite directions. The high-end audiophile that sound is absolutely the most important is going to end up with a system that does not have very good connectivity. That's going to limit the demand for that product and the desirability of that product to the masses, while it might make it more desirable to an individual, very tweak-oriented consumer. Another thing is market segmentation. In the old days, actually 10 years ago, where did you go to buy a hi-fi component? You went to a hi-fi store. Nowadays, there are so many other options for ways to buy gear. You can buy it online. Is the primary way. I mean, Amazon. How many people have not shopped on Amazon in the room? Yeah. Okay. So that's pretty good market penetration, isn't it? 100% of the people in the room have shopped on Amazon, and you probably noticed that what you can buy on Amazon is a lot more than just books, athletic socks, telephones. Pardon?
Welding equipment.
Yes, and that's going to continue. At the same time, for high-end audio, the problem is how to find people who can afford to buy our stuff. They're not walking into hi-fi stores. They're not necessarily shopping on Amazon, although maybe they are. An example of market segmentation that I think is working really well and is perhaps an example of things that the high-end will do in the future is everyone's familiar with Neiman Marcus, right? Are you familiar with Leica cameras? Leica just made a special edition M9 specifically for Neiman Marcus, only available through Neiman Marcus. You know, it'd be kind of interesting to maybe see a special edition Parasound, or a special edition Krell or a special edition Wadia for Neiman Marcus, because that's where the people who can afford it are. So that's an example of some of the new sales and distribution chains. And basically that's it. And I'm going to open it up to our panelists to give us about 7 minutes of introduction to who they are and talking about the reactions to all the horrible things I've been saying. And then we'll open it up to questions. You may have noticed we have pieces of those little cards that were passed out. If you would, if anything I've said or anything they said brings up questions or you have specific questions, put them on the cards, pass them to the end, and we'll get them up to the front, and that way I can, kind of the second half will be Q&A, and hopefully a lot more fun. That's it. We're going to move over to the next thing we're going to do. And we're going to start with Richard Schram.
Hi, all. I enjoyed the summary. I have the kind of 30,000-foot perspective that comes from having been in this business and having made a living at this business since I was 16, and which is a really long time ago. And I want to talk about a perspective on the business that comes from my career before starting Parasound, which was in 1981, and that career was in retail of audio. And I was in a very lucky position to have joined a single store firm in Berkeley, California, which was where I was going to school, and helped build it into a 103-store chain, which was the largest audio retailer in the world by an order of magnitude at that time. What I observed about the place of audio really was something that Stephen touched on, but it was a convergence of factors. This was past the hobbyist, the returning war vets who wanted some luxury things and had some electronic knowledge. It was the convergence of a few things that were really quite remarkable. One of them was stereo multiplex broadcasting becoming widespread in most markets in the country. And that was a major change. The other was that solid-state equipment started to become adequately reliable. The first solid-state equipment that was built was horrible and unstable and broke, but that started to be reliable. The third was the position of music in society, fueled largely by concerns about Vietnam and social expression. And a lot of the, being in San Francisco at the time was kind of a cool place to be because so much of what was going on in music came from that place. Being in audio was amazing at that time. But these things all conspired to make audio very important. Music was very important. It was a destination for most people. I can kind of sum it up by remembering when I was observing some people getting a demo in one of the company stores, and there was a group of young people, and I was kind of eavesdropping on their conversation after the demo was over, and I'd expected that the conversation would be something like discussing the merits of what they had heard, or whether they liked the salesman or whatever it was. And what they were talking about was giving up their individual apartments and moving in together so they could afford what they had just heard because it was that important to them. And it sounds like a joke now, and at that time it was really very symptomatic. And we got, and this is, so we're talking, at this point we're talking late 60s, early 70s, and it was really the golden era of how important audio was and how important music was. And I want to pose a question which I ask to colleagues, other manufacturers from time to time, and I'll be curious to know what the reaction in the room is. What's the last time that any of you listened to a symphony, if you like classical music, or a complete album from beginning to end uninterrupted? So 3 of you responded. Okay. Okay. All right. I should have phrased it differently. Are there those of you that regularly will listen to music and it's all you do, and you will listen to a complete work of music and not do something else? Cool. More, I'll tell you that there are a larger percentage of you in the room responding in the affirmative than there are manufacturers when I ask them. it seems that life kind of catches us up, and the music becomes more of an accompaniment to our life than the destination. I can remember I used to want nothing more than to go home, open a bottle of wine, and listen to music. It's really all I wanted to do to save my soul after a day of working. But that isn't the way it is any longer. And I think the challenges that face our segment of the business, and I kind of characterize, when high-end, I kind of characterize our segment of the business as the part of the business that has passion in it that's shared by the creators of the equipment and the consumers of the equipment, and to an extent the creators of the music that gives us reason to do this. So I've used up my time, and I think we'll come back to some of the themes. But my concern isn't my concerns are not so much the perfection of sampling rates for digital and things like that, so much as what the music means and how we get to enjoy that music with the equipment that is already really, really fabulous. I think we throw up a lot of confusion before we even get to the point of people understanding what's good already. We're kind of always talking about the future rather than what's available now. So, Phil?
Well, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? I'm Phil Murray. I'm with Listen Up. Listen Up is a retail store that's been here. We were started in 1972, and we're fortunate enough to, we're still owned by the original founders, Walt Stinson and Steve Weiner, and they started the company because they had a love of audio, and as Richard was saying, in the early 70s, music was something that our generation aspired to better sound, and I think at that time we had fewer outlets for music. Richard mentioned FM. You mainly heard music through the radio. Now there are, a myriad of choices and a myriad of styles, but I think it was much more of a shared experience back then. But over the past 38 years, we've been able to ride, a number of waves. I think in the 70s, it was a lot of the Vietnam vets coming back and music addressing the war, and people who had been over there had been able to buy Pioneer receivers, TAC reel-to-reels, great equipment for a fraction of what they paid for over here. So it got people into audio, and in the early 80s when the CD player came out, that was a great wave for a retailer to ride, and it got people into music, and although I'll never forget my first experience with a CD player, getting it home and hooking it up, and I bought 12 or 13 CDs, and I put on a CD of a piece of music I knew real well, and it sounded all kind of compressed and shrunk, and I was like, this isn't perfect sound forever. But as but in terms of driving the business throughout the 80s, it was the first year we really got behind CD. In the first year, we actually sold more CD players than any other retailer in the country. And then in the 90s, we had home theater and 5.1 sound, and home theater was one of those things that I didn't think was ever people were gonna lose interest in. It was just, an incredible wave. And then with all the new construction and cheap mortgages, control systems became a huge part of our business. And up until 2 or 3 years ago, we had this incredible HD TV bubble, and everybody needed to replace their TV. What's happened over the last couple of years is TV sales have fallen off, and we've seen, I think, because of the growth of the iPod, computer audio, people are getting into music more. But again, because of the iPod, we're not selling music players other than turntables. Turntables have kind of increased in sales, and it's been kind of fun to see that come back. But most of our business now, we're seeing an increase in people are into music. They want to hear music with their computer, with their iPhone. So it's too bad John's not here because he's got a great product, the iTransport, that allows you to take a digital signal and turn your iPod into a true high-end digital music server. So a lot of what we're doing now, we're seeing a lot more interest in audio, a lot more interest in music, but it's all driven around the computer and computer audio. And just a couple other things I wanted to address. I was at a industry meeting earlier this year, and I think this speaks to the changes in our industry. Last year, the industry sold $640 million in loudspeakers. However, the headphone market was $690 million. It was the first time there were more headphones sold than loudspeakers, which really kind of shocked me, but it shouldn't have, because we also have an e-commerce site, and on the e-commerce site, headphones are one of those things you don't have to go into a store and listen to. You can read a review and go, oh, those sound fine, and order those. And Stephen's comment about Amazon was interesting because we've become, over the past year, an affiliate of Amazon and seen tremendous growth in that business. And I think Amazon's goal is basically to become the only place we all shop at the end of the day. And it really does make me wonder where the specialty audio video store fits in, because the demographics, as we've talked about, are changing. We did this past year a Music Matters event where we brought in all of our audio vendors, and they had kind of a mini audio fest, if you will. And I think the number of people that were under the age of 45 could probably fit on this hand. It was, people just don't aspire to great sound. They're into music. Music is important to them, but the level of sound quality is not important to them. I have a couple of kids, one's 21, one's 25. I have a dedicated music listening room where I go in, shut the door, and I do listen to an album all the way through. I remember when I set up this room, I worried, what if they bring their friends in here and start screwing around with the turntable or something? It's never been an issue. I got this great hi-fi. They don't care about it. So, as a retailer, that concerns me. So, we'll throw it up to you guys.
So, did anyone have any questions written down that they can pass to the end so that I can then, if somebody would collect those for me, that would be just so wonderful. Or just pass them up to the front, and well, just like pass everything up to the front, and we'll be good to go, and that'll be great. Oh, we got this. This first question's great. I like this. This will keep us going for a while. Oh, I can read this. That's wonderful. Okay. Okay. Some good questions. I'm just kind of feeling what order I'm going to do these in and get some flow. Okay. I like this first question because I think we can all sort of deal with it. I'm going to kind of throw it to Richard first. Do you think there'll always be a gap between mass market mentality and the more discerning audiophile hobbyist? Is this okay?
I hope so. It's okay. It's okay if the audiophile community doesn't abuse the trust of the mass market. I think one of the reasons that we're so screwed is the way we conduct ourselves. At the time I referred to when I was in retail, because it was really about the coolest endeavor. Selling audio equipment was, my friends just thought that was the neatest thing there was. Of course, they were in graduate school and they make a lot more money now. But the audio establishment really took itself so seriously, and as a group, we kind of tend to talk to each other and at each other more than we do the rest of the world. And as a result, we draw fire from people like Walt Mossberg that writes for Wall Street Journal, and other journalists that think we are absolute nut jobs. And it's one of the reasons that we've stayed as a niche kind of business. In many regards, just walking around the show and looking at some of the spectacular equipment that's here, it's not equipment that the majority of the population would ever tolerate having in their homes, much less be able to afford. And and we've indulged in that. We've really made ourselves a target of ridicule in many ways because of the abuses. A person will go into an establishment, whether it's a specialty store or whether it's a Best Buy or an Ultimate or whatever it might be, to try to buy something, and whether it's a male or female customer, and the way the store will behave is so badly in terms of condescension or ignoring the person that I can sum up what the result of it is in 2 words. And the result of that abuse is Bose radio.
No sale.
No, I'm really being very serious. Some people are so dismayed by what happens and how daunting it is, and the self-indulgence of the salespeople who are snowing them with specs that are utterly irrelevant to them, that they figure, if all I wanted was music. And so there's millions of Bose radios sold that are fueled by the way that we conduct ourselves as both manufacturers and as retailers in the industry.
And it's a very safe purchase for people. It's sort of like the old saying in the computer industry is nobody ever got fired for buying an IBM.
Well, I want to make one other point about it, and that is, picking on Bose for a second, everybody does, but one of the reasons, if you ask the average person, not anybody in the room, but just the average person on the street, what's a high-end audio brand, they're going to say Bose. And the reason they're going to say Bose is that they figured something out, actually from my bosses where I used to work, which was spending a disproportionate amount of their revenue on building their marketplace. When the Bose radio was introduced, I don't know, 15, 16 years ago, whenever it was, the first 2 years of that product life, they spent $65 million advertising it. $65 million is probably approaching the budget of all the audio specialty manufacturers combined on an annual basis. And was it worth it to be in every media, place on the planet? Well, they sold 1,200,000 of them in the first 2 years. I guess it was a good investment. Audio, high-end audio has really had a very much of a love-hate relationship with commerce, partly because many of us manufacturers are enthusiasts at heart. I'm a lousy businessman, but I am an avid hobbyist, and that is typical of the industry. We've not budgeted. We underprice our equipment in many cases. We don't budget to go out and reach people, and we're suffering for that now.
It seems like the mass mentality are influenced by hype a lot, and it's just a lot of advertising. But I used to read High Fidelity. I got into this hobby 20, 30 years ago, reading High Fidelity. I finally got some little ad about stereophile. I said I thought I'd check it out, and it opened up a whole new world. A lot of people are just ignorant. They don't know what's out there.
Yeah, because we don't do much outreach in the industry. We're too busy yelling at each other to go, look at us, we've got something here that you should be aware of. And that's unfortunate. Tossing it over to Phil in terms of on the retail front.
The one thing that Bose identified was, they brought out a wave radio that made it simple for people to enjoy decent sound quality, and
in a simple purchase decision.
No cables.
There's a viral video on right now that I won't quote, but where the woman goes into a high-end shop, little cartoon characters, and she just wants to buy a Bose radio. And right.
And parking validation?
Yes, and parking, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's important.
Which you need at
that
this
can cost
show,
more
by
than
the
the
way.
component some places.
So, anyway, go
But yeah, and I think this kind of dovetails into one of the other questions that I see here is a two-part question. How can we attract younger enthusiasts, and why don't we concentrate more on high-performance, budget-priced gear? And then thirdly, what about demos? Which sort of, it's funny, looking at Amazon, I buy a lot of stuff through Amazon and eBay. I could basically survive and get everything I ever need the rest of my life. But one of the best aspects of Amazon is their users, their little feedback and comments thing at the bottom. I know whenever I buy something of which I know nothing about, the first thing I look at is the comments to see if, I don't expect one comment to influence me, but if there are 10 comments that say, I bought this thing and it broke 2 weeks later, I ain't going to buy it. But that's still not the same as having something demonstrated in the real world. Someone got back. You mentioned headphones and how people can buy headphones by looking at the specs and buying them. I disagree with that, because for me, about 80% of the in-ear headphones I have tried in my life do not fit my ears. They just don't go in. They fall out. I mean, the classic Apple headphones last about 5 seconds in my ear before it goes falls right out. So if I can't try a headphone, or if I can't see that it has a certain kind of a fitting that I know is going to work in my ear, I'm not going to buy it. So on that level, I think there are a lot of products that, if they're demonstrated, will sell themselves. But the problem we have is, how do you demonstrate them in a e-commerce world? And so I sort of toss that over to Phil a little bit, because that's a problem you must be dealing with in the retail front.
Absolutely. I mean, we've set up very nice headphone displays in all of our stores. You can go in and listen to a number of different headphones. And the way to really be successful selling headphones is to approach it like a speaker sale. The problem is and what I was saying is, the majority of people, Monster got into the headphone business in the past couple of years. The first model was the Dr. Dre Beat. Monster identified headphones not as an audio product, although they're okay as an audio product, but they identified them as a fashion statement. And so they now have Lady Gaga headphones, they have Dr. Dre, they have Diddy Beats. I mean, and they have become the #1 headphone
so it's a lifestyle product.
It's a lifestyle product,
right.
And that's why we sell them online, like hundreds a month. I mean, it's just incredible to me.
I'd like to address the larger issue. Among the really well-known and well-respected retailers around the country, Listen Up was always near the top of the list. Listen Up is in e-commerce only because they need to be, because that's the way things have gone. And the sad part for our business is, for many people, one of the only ways that you're going to get an opportunity to listen to high-end audio is here at this show. There are frequent times that we find that we will ship our product to a dealer for somebody who wants to audition it when the dealer can't afford to own the product to have on demo because of their own economic situation. We try to aid them in that way. One of the other things is about the high-end segment is that we're really balkanized. The way that there didn't used to be very many brands, and the handful of great brands was really static for years. It was just like, I grew up with 4 broadcast television stations, 2, 4, 5, 7, and 9 was all we had in Chicago. That was it. And now there's, how many choices that are instant. So what happened with high-end audio was that retailers, to defend themselves, would ally with a brand, and they would beat up a manufacturer and say, okay, I'll sell X amount of your product, but you can't sell anybody else in town. So then another manufacturer would have a similar alliance with another dealer, and pretty soon people were pushing products not based on the merit of the product or how valuable that experience would be for their customer, but for the commercial reality that it couldn't be, they didn't have competition for it, and they wouldn't have to discount it. And that's one of the reasons that there are there are so many brands that can hang on because of that, but it means that your chances of making a comparison before spending your money and having a well-informed decision are virtually nil. So if it's already that bad, then that's kind of going to give you more temptation to do business with an Amazon.
The safe choice.
And regrettably, there is no way that you can raise goosebumps over the internet. And you can't sell high-end audio without goosebumps.
Not in audio.
Yeah, right. The bigger picture is really, really challenging. It doesn't look all that great. I don't think there's an automatic pendulum swing when people are going to get bored with buying things over the internet. I think that the companies like my own hold on, and we're doing quite well. But I think we're picking up a larger share of a shrinking market. And it does concern me that we've brought a lot of this onto ourselves, and we've made it very tough for you as enthusiasts to enjoy the process of this, because it used to be a lot of fun. The salespeople and the customers were pretty much equally informed and a very collegial group, and now it's pretty hard to find a place to buy something, and people are asking you for a lot of your money on faith, and I don't know that we do a good job of deserving that.
Well, and one of the other issues is, and it's a problem for manufacturers like Richard, is that in the last couple of years, due to the recession, a number of AV specialists and even strong chains, regional chains, have just gone out of business. We're a member of a buying group called the Pro Group, and and we're very unlike most of the other retailers in the Pro Group, but in the last 4 years, we've seen Tweeter, which was a big chain back east, went out of business. Meyer Emco, which was a huge chain in the DC area. Flanners, which was a great family-owned business since around 1900. Another store called Ken Crane's in LA. We've lost
Ken Crane's, great store. Laser discs.
Right. We've seen, and not to mention a number of smaller AV specialists. On our online business, Richard's right, we need to do it, and we try to be a safe haven for people on the internet world, but we've started to develop relationships with manufacturers where they might only have 30 retailers in the country. We've agreed not to sell into an area where they do have one, but there's a lot of major markets like Atlanta that don't have a distributor for this brand. And so because of the shrinking retailer base, manufacturers are having to develop some type of internet strategy.
So the internet is filling in those areas where manufacturers don't have, but then you basically have to go to the experience of kind of vetting each customer to go, where do you live? Who's nearby?
Yeah, it's not an easy.
Yeah. So
it's not an
and
easy
what if
thing.
somebody tells you, oh, I live in Connecticut where you haven't got anybody, and actually they live in New York City where there are like 3 dealers. You're placed in the position of having to be the bad guy. Go, yeah, I can't sell to you, which brings up all those sort of weird issues in the past.
It's a sticky thicket.
Yeah. So I guess leads us to the next question I see in here. Will the audiophile market disappear over time because of Gen X or Y indoctrination via lossy music formats? In other words, I guess if everyone's listening to low-quality MP3s, what's the reason to buy better quality gear? If all you're listening to is MP3s, there is a point where, yeah, you might as well be listening with a Dixie cup and a string. But the other side of the coin is human beings, the way we're configured. If somebody is exposed to higher definition sources and true high-def music, it's really kind of hard to go back once you've heard it, once you've gotten that emotional experience from music, that direct connection that you don't get from MP3s. I mean, it can be argued that one of the reasons that Gen Ys and Xers do multiple things and don't dedicate themselves to listening to music is that the music they get is of such low resolution that there's not enough there to fully engage their attention. I mean, I certainly know the phenomena periodically. You know, I've got a huge music library. Most of it is full res, non-lossy, but there's a certain amount of stuff that's lossy because I started back in the days when hard drives were a lot more money than they are now, and so did a lot of stuff with MP3, 320, and I'll be, you know, putting it on shuffle, and it'll be playing through various things, and I'll hit a track, and halfway through the track, I'll find myself in the kitchen making myself lunch instead of listening to the music, and I'll go and see that, oh God, that was an MP3 track. No wonder I wandered away. So if we can expose people to high resolution, there's less reason for them not to be involved in music, because the nature of music is so powerful that if given to people in high enough resolution, there is no way they can not become moved by it.
What's the key? Just exposure?
Yeah, that's the problem. How do you get people to hear what there is out there? Okay, you raised your hand, so I'll translate for you.
On a similar note, I don't know, I sort of sense that of the general population, there's a sort of anti-snob appeal towards it. You know, it's sort of like, almost like they don't want to give high-res a chance, or, you know.
It sounds like what you're saying is the high end has sort of shot ourselves in the foot in terms of our PR to people who are perhaps not, who haven't drunk the Kool-Aid yet.
Yeah, I think like they won't give it a chance, an honest chance anyway. You know,
Okay, and the gentleman 2 rows in back of you, yes.
I wouldn't agree with that too much. That's possibly true. But I find, just a paradigm, I work in an industry where I have an opportunity to demo high-res audio often.
Yeah, okay.
It's cars, actually. I did it 3 days ago. I have a room full of people. I talk for a living. So I have a room full of people talking about other aspects of the vehicle. They're talking about Bluetooth audio. By the way, I'm going to borrow your analogy, Dixie cup and a string, because that's how I'm going to describe that right now.
Right.
You know, from now on.
Feel free.
Because it is indeed like that. It's 64 kilobits. I try to explain to them that's not music. That's why it's called Bluetooth audio and not Bluetooth music, because at 64 kilobits, all the musicality is gone.
Exactly. That's the issue.
Sounds. And I have some deer in the headlights, and I say, look, I can talk for another 10 minutes or another hour, but I'm going to give you a demo. And that's going to show you a lot quicker than I can explain it. You know, then I have some in the back chuckling, and they're like, yeah, right, and I love those guys. They're the first to fall. You put them in the car, you put in a disc with high resolution, Mark Levinson audio system, you might be able to figure that out now, who it is. It's just, their mouths are agape. Literal. Young folks, middle-aged. One guy sat in the front seat and kept asking, how in the heck did you do this? I've never heard things like this.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think it mattered.
So again, the experiential part of our business and that's what all got us into it. Everyone in the room at one point had an epiphany. They sat down in front of a system and it moved them in such a way that it's changed their lives.
I think that it's helpful to remember that good audio was never in the mass market. The early transition that Stephen referred to of people transitioning from the console, radio, phono, TV combinations to components was always a very specialized market and a very, very small part of the market. And I think we tend to look at Gen X, Gen Y, and worry about getting or losing all of those people, and that our industry doesn't need all of those people. I think there is probably some hope that there will be enough exposures, there will be enough impatience. I think there are some signs of it now. My 20-year-old, a number of his friends are making a transition from compressed MP3 to vinyl, because there's a lot of reasons why vinyl appeals that are unrelated to how it sounds. There's kind of a ritual involved, and it's sort of retro, and all the turntables are beautiful. But I think there will be enough of that in time that a healthy industry that conducts itself reasonably intelligently and without being so self-contained probably does have a chance to survive, and that's what I'm counting on.
Sure.
You had said that the way to sell headphones, or it's easy to sell headphones, people just read a review, but then you also said that the way to sell headphones would be to sell them like speakers. So can you maybe expand on that a little bit?
Well, my first comment was more of a reality statement of what's happening out there, because there's so many headphones being sold online. I think the way that you can get somebody into a better pair of headphones or find one that fits better is to have adequate display, good demo source, and to really approach it like you're selling somebody a pair of loudspeakers. But the reality of it is, because this is what I see online, is people read a review and buy a pair of headphones. And the whole monster phenomena, which is they're approaching the headphones because they look cool, not because they sound good.
Well, they're the new athletic shoes.
Yeah, they are the new
Exactly.
athletic shoes.
They're selling headphones exactly the way Nike sold shoes.
And Nike will
Yeah.
be selling headphones.
Yeah.
I'm sure
Yeah.
that would be the
I'll
case. Well,
tell
because
you-
it becomes who has the market and what can you sell into the market and what can you identify. And those companies that already have a foothold in non-audio markets and come in with audio products have a chance of being the first person on their block, the number one seller in that new market division, that new market type. And anyone who's done marketing, the trick is to be number one, number two, or if you're unfortunate, number three in a product category. If you can't be number one or number two or three in a product category, you make a new product category that you can be number one at.
Why don't they use like the Apple Store as a model, because you can actually, they actually have different the little in-ear headphones that you can actually audition different things and different iPads, iPods.
I think the Apple Store is a model for where retailing and brick and mortar has to go in the future. It has to be an engaging experience that's so much fun and adds so much to you that you're willing to drive to it.
Just like audio used to be.
Exactly. If you can get the same level of involvement and experience on the internet, why should you leave your desk? You're not gonna.
I think one of the concerns, because I'm glad you mentioned the Apple Store, my concern, my kind of flip statement of worry where it goes is when Apple's going to own the living room, because a lot of high-end manufacturers do what we do, not necessarily because we love to do this, but because we were unable to do larger things, either undercapitalized or under-talented. And Apple is a very clever company, and they have designs on audio, and what they bring to it is convenience and trust and fashion and a lot of things that we kind of don't bother getting around to or can't afford to do well. So my concern is that a company like Apple will ascend, and that'll be a huge challenge for us.
That's pretty funny, because they used to be small potatoes not too many years ago.
Minor market share in the computer industry, right? IBM didn't have a thing to worry about. Not at all. I think the last question, because I think we're getting near our time limit. Are we? Are we getting near? Okay, so last question. Will PC/Squeezebox replace CD players? Wow, I like an easy last question that also hopefully will leave us on a positive note. As far as I'm concerned, they already have.
Yeah.
How many of you play a CD more than once? Okay. You obviously aren't computer audio based yet. Not yet. That's why.
I still play CDs.
You still play the straight CDs.
I'm counting on all of you, because we're going to introduce a very, very high-end CD player beginning of the year, and it is very contrary to trends. But if you look at business, there are industries that can make. There are Rust Belt businesses that can make money. People that make paper clips still make money, and I think that there is a large enough base of people who own CDs who don't even know how good they sound yet that we're going to be able to get by. And do very well with the product. And it sounds very contrary, but I think it serves the needs of people who have a big library who just aren't inclined to shove them all on a hard disk.
I can tell you from the retailer standpoint, the number of CD players we sell these days is, and the one product category that we're just booming with is Sonos, which distributes your music wirelessly around the house, streams whatever kind of music you want to listen to, and we got behind them about 5 years ago, and it has grown by 30–40% every year. And you know, the days of selling a CD changer, that just doesn't happen anymore.
Sonos is a fascinating product in that they're, in our definition of high-end, they are not a high-end product. They are basically a mid-fi product. Their maximum they do is 48 kilohertz. But the beauty of them is they're about as sexy as a toaster. And just like a toaster, every time you go to use a Sonos, it works. That in itself, for a lot of consumers out there, is reason enough to buy a Sonos instead of a high-end system. And
with the Sonos is a huge boon to our business, because we sell a little half-rack size amplifier that a large number of Sonos systems use, so they can sound a whole lot better and sound like real audio. So there are ways that high-end manufacturers can attach themselves to the trends and enhance the experience and make some money off of it.
Yeah, I believe it's there's the Nova product, the integrated amp, has a space in back that you can just slide the Sonos in and attach it. So in some ways, again, coming back to going the future and trying to look positive, things like distributed audio, wireless audio, computer audio are the future. And it does allow us, ideally, to have that same level of quality as a mastering engineer has. And that's something we've never had a chance to do before, and is very exciting. So I guess with that, we're going to finish this up and have a wonderful rest of the show. Thank you.
Thank you.